We now have many drugs available for the treatment of psoriatic arthritis. We have 6 different modes of action now available to us on top of conventional synthetic DMARDs. And we have data from randomized controlled trials showing that each of these drugs works better than placebo, but we are lacking large comparative trials of head-to-head trials of one drug against another, in particular for modes of action which have appeared after the TNF inhibitors. So with the support of Janssen, we planned a large international 20-country study. It's an observational study of patients with psoriatic arthritis who are starting a biologic, and they can be starting either an IL-23 inhibitor, guselkumab, or any one of the IL-17A inhibitors which are available. The choice is based on the physician choice. It's not a randomized controlled trial, and it's an observational study over 3 years. Now, we have included 1,300 patients in this study, and follow-up is ongoing. But at this ACR Congress, I'm only showing the interim results for the first 650 patients over the first 6 months of follow-up. In terms of the baseline characteristics of these patients, it's interesting to note that they mainly had moderate rather than severe disease activity. So they had less swollen joints than what we typically see in PSA randomized clinical trials. They also had less important skin involvement, with quite a number of them at baseline already have limited skin involvement. And in terms of comorbidities, they had quite a few comorbidities. And there were also some differences between patients starting guselkumab and patients starting an IL-17A inhibitor, because this was based on the physician choice, and it's not a randomized trial. Patients who were starting guselkumab were more often with more skin involvement, and they also had a bit more comorbidities, including obesity. We also had then a follow-up over 6 months. And the first interesting finding is that in terms of treatment maintenance over 6 months was very high. Around 95% of patients were still on their drug after 6 months in both of the treatment arms. And there were very few drug interruptions, and the reasons for stopping the drug were quite similar between guselkumab and the IL-17A inhibitors. The second key finding is around the efficacy of the drugs after 6 months. And we had similar rates of low disease activity or remission. The rates were higher using CDAPSA or DAPSA as the score to assess disease activity than when using MDA, which is the other way to assess the status of good disease control. But the rates were quite similar between the two treatment arms. And when we adjusted on baseline differences, and this is called using propensity scores, we actually found a similar efficacy for both of the drug types. The third key finding we have, which actually is being presented as an oral presentation at this Congress, is around efficacy as perceived by the patient. Because in this study, we analyzed the PSAID-12, which is a patient-reported outcome, assessing key aspects of quality of life for patients. And we found that the main aspects of impact of disease at baseline were pain and also fatigue, which we know is really important for patients. And after 6 months, the PSAID total score, which is a 0 to 10 score, was lower by around 1.5 to 1.8 points in both of the treatment arms, without any clear differences between the arms. And in terms of the subdomains of the PSAID-12, we also found that both drugs appear to work quite similarly from the patient's perspective. Again, these are interim results, so we need to look forward now to the full results on the full population, which will be in a few months. So what are the implications of these findings? I think it's really important for clinicians to know why they're prescribing one drug over another. There are many elements which come into play there. Patient preferences are one, and the facility in using the drug, the feasibility. Also, the cost is something which is important. But I do think the two main elements are efficacy and safety. And Sorbonne is really a large international study which will give us so much data about patient status, comorbidities, and then, of course, efficacy and also safety of drugs in a large population. these first results are quite interesting because although we don't have head-to-head trials, some physicians have a belief that some drugs work better than others. And it's quite difficult to compare randomized control trials because the placebo rates are not the same, the patient population is not the same. But here we have a truly comparative study. We are adjusting on baseline differences using propensity scores, and the fact that we find similar differences, I think, is very reassuring for the clinician. It means that the clinician can make the decision that he or she thinks is the right decision in the context of shared decision-making, and currently we don't have data to support one drug over another. I think we really need to insist on the importance of shared decision-making in PSA because it's a disease where the patient burden is really high, not only because of the disease itself, the skin involvement, but also the comorbidities. And we really need to make the best choice for our patients. I'm looking forward to randomized data comparing drugs. There is actually a trial which is ongoing, which is a true comparative trial. We also have then the Psoriatic full data, which we will have but in a while because it's a 3-year study. And some of the aspects which I also think we need to concentrate on top of comparative efficacy is really making sure we manage comorbidities. That's really important for our patients. It's really what's linked to increased mortality in this population. And also I think lifestyle advice is really important for this population as well.